Good afternoon. A little bit of context around this particular case study, in as much as that what started out as a safety problem has now become a national set of qualifications specifically applicable to the mining industry. Imagine, if you will, I'm driving down the road, my phone rings, hands-free. I answer the phone, the general manager of a client says, "Where are you? What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm travelling through Newcastle." He said, "Be here in 30 minutes, got a job for you." I thought, okay. So I turn up, and the client is BIS Industries. General manager is a very outgoing, forthright individual. He said, "I have a safety problem, and I'm told you're the solution." So I thought, well, fair enough. "What's your problem?" He said, "I'll get to that." He said, "I need to introduce you to the director for this particular division." And the director came in, folded a 3-ring folder across the desk to me and said, "Our problem is in that. It's all about safety." He said, "I want to focus you on our key areas of safety, zero harm. It's our culture. We take responsibility for it, and we look after the people and the places and the environment and the communities in which we work. Don't forget that," he said, "because what's in that folder scares me to death." By now I've got sweat running down my face. I thought, what have I got myself into? So I said, well, okay, what's all this about? And he said, "It's about non-compliance and safety, and non-compliance is not acceptable in our organisation." I'm thinking someone in the organisation is doing something wrong. He said, "And it's not us. It's those other people out there who are working for us." A little bit more confusion. In today's market, BIS Industries provide about 25% of all underground machines in the underground coal industry. It's about 1,000 diesel engine powered machines running around the coal mines, and BIS have about 25% market share. So on those sort of numbers, you're looking around about 250 machines. With their zero harm philosophy and these non-compliance issues that were occurring, they wanted to make sure that they had a system in place that they were not exposed to safety or risk anymore. And apparently I was going to be the solution. During the height of the growth of the coal industry and the mining industry and the boom, BIS took the business initiative, if you like, to have all of their machines maintained and serviced by contracting companies, either the OEMs who designed and built the machines, or contracted workshops across New South Wales and Queensland who did the work for them. Some of those maintenance activities were not done to standard, and some of the end users, the mining companies, were also causing problems by, I guess, doing their own maintenance on the run. Reportable instances of non-compliance to the Department of Industry and Infrastructure were on a record high in regards to the integrity of the flame path of a diesel engine in underground coal mines. Now, a diesel engine is a diesel engine, 25,000 explosions per minute inside the engine, and that's okay. The top of the range diesel engines, your Cummings, your Detroits, your Caterpillars. To go underground in a coal mine, those diesel engines have to be packaged in a system to make sure that there is no risk of fire, explosion, or any other sort of catastrophe to the mine itself or to the people who work there. The DII questioned BIS as to what they were going to do about the number of reportable incidences that were occurring and how they were going to address that going forward. The point that the Chief Inspector of Mines in New South Wales made was, you must make sure you've got competent people. Now, Australian Standard 3584 Parts 2 and 3 was written in 1988, or became enacted in 1988. It had one clause in it which said you've got to have competent people, and then you have this image in your mind that competent people mean qualified and available. To go underground, a diesel engine has to have registration by the Department of Industry and Infrastructure. certification for its components, and make sure that nothing can be done to interfere with the flame path that comes out of that particular engine. Some examples of risks posed by diesel engines in underground coal mines: coal dust ignition. Coal dust will ignite at around about 155 degrees Celsius. Surface temperatures on a diesel engine system must be maintained at less than 150 degrees C. And there are whole systems in place, cooling systems, shutdown systems, monitoring systems, that make sure that that surface temperature on the diesel engine can't reach more than 150 degrees C. High temperature from sparks from glowing carbon from the exhaust because the engine hasn't been properly maintained or the exhaust system is failing. Inlet and exhaust systems, joints, shutdown systems, fuel systems, all of those things can contribute to causing a potential explosion in an underground coal mine. So the design standards that came out in 1988 hadn't been changed until 2012, and they were going through a review at the time. And in Queensland, the recognised standards up there reflect the AS 3584 Part 3, which is on maintenance. So where was business exposure? The number of reportable safety incidents they were getting was increasing, not decreasing, and increasing by something in the order of around 3 to 4% per month. When I got involved in this particular case, they were looking at 11 reportable incidents involving their machines. So it was fairly high, fairly significant, and the risk, if you want to take it to the end, worst case scenario, and I'm not talking about debating about what caused it, but the Pike River explosion in New Zealand. End result, that's what we were looking at trying to overcome. The risks they faced were significant, and as the director said, non-compliance is not acceptable in terms of their safety. They wanted corrective actions. They wanted something developed, built to make sure that they were not exposed. And there appeared to be, from my perspective, a lack of authority towards those maintenance and safety standards, as opposed to Australian Standard 3800, which is the electrical standard for intrinsically safe equipment in underground coal mines, where they have a very rigorous set of standards. They have a very rigorous training program, competency program, and they follow it up and make sure that they're not in breach. So the industry was at risk, and BIS wanted to make sure that they weren't the one who caused it. We were engaged to investigate and recommend corrective actions to the safety problem. So I went into this whole project with a mindset, I'm dealing with a safety issue here. I'm an engineer, I'm a trained accident investigator, incident investigator. I'm thinking in my mind, you've got a problem, why isn't the problem being addressed or fixed? So I looked at all of the reportable incidents and all of the information that was coming back from DII and BIS, and looked at all the contracting companies who were providing work, trying to find out not what so much was happening, but why it was happening. I looked at the contracting company safety management and training systems, the level of qualified people working on those particular pieces of equipment, the number of people, did they have enough people doing the work at the time? The ability of the contracting companies to meet the timelines. We're at the height of the coal boom, pressure was on, more machines. Possession of a machine in an underground coal mine was gold. If they had the machine, they would not give it back. They hired it, they kept it, because to them, that was output. And the level of knowledge within the industry towards DES maintenance, or that particular Australian Standard 3584. So we set up an investigation tool, quite a detailed capturing process, and went out to each of those contracting companies and workshops and did an audit on how they did the work for the client, the number of people, the qualifications they had, etc. What we found was quite alarming, and alarming in as much as that most of the organisations not only didn't know much about Australian Standard 3584, that the people who came and were working in the workshops didn't come from the industry. Most of the people working in the workshops had never been into an underground coal mine, had never actually worked in an underground coal mine, let alone carried out any major maintenance. The lack of knowledge and the skill set to look after a diesel engine system was sadly lacking. There were very few qualified people performing that particular work. The skill shortage was having a huge effect. I did an audit on one particular company who had 20 people working in the organisation. Only 2 of them were qualified heavy vehicle mechanics. The leading hand working on the diesel engine system was the boilermaker. He'd been there a long time. There were 3 light vehicle automotive mechanics working in the workshop, and there were 7 apprentices. No one training the apprentices, they were just in there working. So the lack of knowledge and accountability towards that, for me, was a major concern. We looked back at 3584 and said, well, okay, what is it that they must do and what are we finding? And there was a huge gap. The biggest issue that I found, though, was this. Nowhere in the Australian training system, education system, qualifications framework, was a single unit of competency dedicated to diesel engine systems. Not in mining, not in automotive, not in heavy vehicle maintenance, auto mechanics, not a single unit of competency. So our initial recommendation back to the client was to set up a contractor management system. In the meantime, we had a raft of more reportable incidents come through from the DII, and in New South Wales, the Chief Inspector of Mines decided he was going to legislate and make this, not going to talk to me. Make this a legislated requirement now that all workshops will be registered and would have competent people. And again, we reflected back and said, well, okay, where do we get competent people from if there are no units of competency or qualifications in New South Wales or anywhere in Australia to train people and qualify people for this particular issue? So as a consequence, we went back to the client and said, well, okay, we need to build a contractor management system for you that incorporates education, induction, and some sort of process that we can make sure that people working on your machines do have the requisite skills and knowledge to be able to do the work in accordance with the standard. The original concept was that BIS said to us, good, go write us a course, get it approved nationally as a course, and we'll look after that and we'll make sure our contractors follow that. And I was fortunate to have the assistance of Greg Venashenkwe, who from KKT Australia is one of the best minds and designers on diesel engine systems in Australia. So we set about the task of writing the course, and that was the original course outline that we came up with, pardon me, to address the diesel engine systems maintenance issues. In the meantime, we also took the proposal and the course outline to the industry, called a meeting of stakeholders, mining companies, workshops, contracting companies, and said, if we wrote this particular course, would you be interested in sending your people to be trained for this particular client? And in the words of Facebook and the YouTube, it went viral. We had such a huge demand from the industry saying, we need this, we want this, it's got to happen. And yes, we want this training, but it's got to be accredited. So while we were talking to our regulator about getting the course approved so that we can issue some sort of formal qualification to people who have been trained, the industry was saying, we need more than this. So we took the issue to Skills DMC, which is the Industry Skills Council for the mining or resources sector, and basically said to them, look, we've got this issue, here's the problem that's occurring, this is what we recommend we can do about it. To her credit, the executive officer at the time of DMC was Dorothy Rao. She could easily have said, no, it's all too hard, we're not going to do this. But she set up a reference committee with a few of us. We looked at how do we go forward and turn this into a national qualification. We met for a number of weeks with that reference committee looking at what the content should be and the output. We then created a wider committee involving all of the mining industries. We had mining companies, contracting companies, transport companies, anyone involved in the operation of the DES system. We met for 12 months, and you can see there's just a raft of companies who were involved in that particular committee. Our final meeting we had in developing these units had 65 companies represented in that particular meeting. We negotiated 7 new units of competency, which now sit in the Resources and Industry Training Package, the RII 09 training package. It's called, I've got finger problems, the RII 09 Skill Set, Explosion Protected Diesel Engine Systems Maintenance. It's a short story. That was put before the Quality Council and endorsed in April 2012. That process took from March 2010 to April 2012. These units of competency here now are part of that training package. In New South Wales, it's legislated that anyone performing any maintenance work on a diesel engine system now must be trained. They are now the competencies for competent people. In Queensland, it was never legislated and never put before Parliament, but you can't work anywhere in a mine site in Queensland on maintenance or in a workshop in Queensland without showing a certificate of training. So that safety problem that started way back in March 2010 now has a complete set of qualifications, training outcomes and trained people. It has been a huge project to go from writing the program to completing it. We've trained in excess of 700 people, tradespeople, engineers, mine managers, government personnel. I mean, it's almost been a continuous process since about June 2011. All of the mining companies, OEMs, contracting companies have all been involved, and it's a continuation that goes on now. So safety was the issue right back from the beginning. Now we have a compliance system, we have a set of qualifications and skills. We can look at someone and say that person is trained, that person is competent and understands the requirements of that standard. The standard had been out, as I said, since 1988. Very few people I spoke to in those organising companies, mining companies and contracting companies even knew it existed. Yet it was the rules, if you like, for carrying out that maintenance. So this is now very public, it's all out in the open. Everyone is being involved in it and trained. It's embedded into BIS now as a part of their contract management system and many of these other companies' maintenance standards. It's an integral part of the tendering process now for BIS. Anyone who wants to do any maintenance work for them has to have this qualification. We review and audit that material constantly to make sure that the standard is current, that what people are doing is current, and the changes in technology that are coming out with diesel engine systems. I think, Richard, what is it, up to tier 7 now, diesel engine systems of Caterpillar. Compliance issues drove this whole change around safety. It was a safety problem to start with, based around non-compliance. And as the director said at the beginning, non-compliance is not acceptable in safety, and it was the driver that set the wheels in motion. We've done a lot of collaboration with our industry partners, Skills Council, people who have been trained, people who are yet to be trained, and exemplifies how the industry can work together and produce the right outcomes, because it would have been quite easy for most of the companies to sit back and say, no, we're not interested, we'll just do what we want to do and keep doing the same thing. Could have been head in the sand stuff, it could have been a disaster, but luckily in that environment, and as a few of the speakers have said today, the communication process that went out there was successful and came up with the right outcomes. So I guess we've all got to be prepared to drive industry change around safety. It's not acceptable not to. So, as I said, we went from a safety problem, the journey took 18 months. We now have a set of qualifications which are embedded in Australian maintenance standards now. So.